Hello everyone. Today I would like to present one more video interview about innovative research methodologies. Betty Adamou, CEO and founder of the company Research Through Gaming, headquartered in London, kindly agreed to discuss with me today a big trend in marketing research, survey gamification. Betty is an outstanding research professional, being an inventor and designer of research games, a PhD student, a speaker, and a graphics artist. Betty, thank you a lot for your time and an opportunity to have this conversation today. Thank you for sharing some of research games on your site. I really enjoyed discovering them by myself. And I should admit, this is a really different experience that one can get as a respondent. But could you please tell me a few words about your experience and how you have got this idea?
So the idea for using games for research came about with quite a few variables that kind of happened at the same time in my life. So I was working at a software company called NADIA that provide like survey software for market research. So like for managing panels and creating surveys and things like that. And it was you know, from a few conversations that I had with a colleague of mine called Marco, that kind of like the seeds of the idea were growing for the both of us, because we were tasked with making the surveys more interesting. So, you know, it started off in a really simple way, Nadia. It was kind of like, you know, how can we make buttons look more interesting? And how can we create engaging like question widget? And you know, he's a developer, and he's you know, as a developer he was very creative as well, so he had loads of really good ideas, and I did too, so we shared those ideas. And then I thought, okay, why can't it be a game, right? Surely there has to be a better way of communicating with people. So I would go to work in the day and I would do this job, and I had worked in the research industry for a few years at that point, so I knew that surveys were quite boring. But I would then go home and then play video games and play like PC games like World of Warcraft. And I would think, well, you know, here I am spending 5-6 hours playing World of Warcraft. Why can't a survey be this engaging? So I then wrote a paper. While I was still working at NADIA, I wrote a paper called The Future of Research Through Gaming. And that was presented at Casro in Las Vegas, which was an amazing.
When did it happen?
That was in 2011, in March 2011, I believe. And, you know, I had never spoken at a conference before. So for me, it was like, oh, you know, I'm a representative of NADIA here and I'm just sharing my idea. I didn't really realise, quite naively, that when you speak at a conference, it should be reflective of the kind of capabilities your company actually has. So I found a lot of people going, oh, this idea for using games is really great. What's the price list? And can I see a demo? And I was like, NADIA do not do this at the moment. I'm really sorry. But I had a lot of friends in the market research industry who said, okay, well, you've done this talk now, you've got people excited, and it is a good idea. So you should leave your job and start this business. So I did. So that was kind of like a lot of things happening at the same time. Those conversations with Marco were really pivotal, you know, doing the paper, having the feedback from my peers to say this is a good idea, because I was quite young, you know, I was 23, 24, thereabouts, and the idea of running my own business had never, like a software business, had never really occurred to me. But, you know, they gave me that confidence, so that was really useful.
This sounds like a great story. Actually, survey gamification is a lot about respondents' engagement. I remember one of the cases when I was working on understanding people's perception of different types of digital government services. At that point of time, I had a lot of 7 points Likert scales. And I was thinking at the time, how bored should be respondents after this survey? And after that, I tried your Dubious game on the side. This is really different experience. Actually, how research game can help to increase respondents' engagement?
Okay, well, I mean, the first thing to make really clear is that games and gamification are completely different mediums, and particularly in the market research realm, the use of a fully fledged game for research will have a very different look and feel and a very different interaction with your participants versus a survey that has been gamified. So the key differences is the type of engagement there is. So lots of surveys rely, for example, on extrinsic motivators, like, you know, they'll give you 50 cents for taking part in a survey, or they'll give you vouchers or points. Or that's kind of the carrot on the stick approach. You know, if you do this survey, then you'll get this thing. And gamification actually works in a very similar way. So with gamification, whether it's loyalty cards, whether it's rewarding good behavior for students, whether it's gamifying a survey, again, it relies on those extrinsic motivators. So if you do this, then you'll get points or a badge or whatever. You know, gamification components are many and varied. But again, it's still a carrot on the stick approach. Whereas with games, you know what it feels like to play a game, because it's that intrinsic engagement. You're not playing a game because somebody's going to give you money, or someone's going to give you points, or someone's going to give you vouchers. You play games for the innate joy in playing that game. And so that intrinsic engagement is really the key difference for me and for participants, because I mean, I could easily design a survey that was gamified with points and badges, but it just wouldn't be as immersive. You know, like I love it when participants say that I learned from that gaming experience. That was such a fun experience. They're talking about it as an experience. They're not talking about it like, oh, I did this survey and it was fun, thank you very much. Although they are saying words like fun, they are more talking about it like, you know, oh, thanks for letting me play that game. And the word play comes up. So, and again, playing as a child and as an adult is a very interesting area. I mean, you know, there's tons of books and journals and articles on, and when we play as adults and as children, we stimulate our minds, we boost creativity, we can work more collaboratively with other people, and that's what we want in research. We want to stimulate people's thinking. We want them to be creative when we're asking them about product development. We want them to be collaborative when we're ideas together and testing concepts. So really, and I hope this answers your question, those are the differences in engagement. So you've got your extrinsic engagement with extrinsic motivators in surveys and even gamified surveys, but a more intrinsic engagement and playful approach with a fully fledged game for research.
Are there any extrinsic motivations which are used for gamified surveys? What kind of them can be?
I imagine that some extrinsic motivators for gamification or for gamified surveys could be things like getting points for answering questions, getting badges, leveling up. It might be that you're still given an incentive at the end, like money or vouchers for actually taking part in the survey. So there are lots of different kinds of extrinsic motivators, but to be clear, even in my own research games, I still work with clients who want to reward the participant for giving their time. So yes, they do get a reward at the end, like an extrinsic motivator. Because my clients, you know, they want to give back to the participants, they want to thank them for their time, so they might give them points in a loyalty program. They might give them, if we're working with the panel company might give them a voucher, whatever it might be. But that intrinsic engagement happens within the research game. And yeah, I mean, I might have participants level up. I might have participants who can download a certificate and things like that. but it's a much more immersive experience, and that's really design led. In a very simple way, develop that as a designer. It comes through trial and error, because as a designer, you're thinking about everything. You're thinking about the fonts you use, you're thinking about the color palette, the music and sound effects, the game architecture, the game flow. You're thinking about moments of tension and then releasing that tension. You're thinking about storytelling in the game. You know, how can I make this like a story that is involving characters and the participant as a character or as themselves in this game. So it just I think comes with experience, and anybody can do it. You know, if you take the time to design a game for research and use some of the components that I teach in workshops and conferences and things like that, you can understand more fully from a design point of view how to encourage intrinsic engagement, even if you are still using extrinsic motivators like money or points or vouchers at the end.
Well, one more question from my side. Do you see any impact on the quality of open-ended questions?
The key thing that I see is that in verbatim responses, and this is just kind of going from the feedback I've had from my clients, they find that is so useful to them in having a deeper understanding of the mindset of the participant. And they'll say things quite candidly to me, like, you know, I didn't want to put in an open-ended question in the research game, but I'm glad I did, because actually this has really helped more than what I've seen in traditional surveys. We've also seen an increased willingness from participants to take part in open-ended surveys as well.
You mentioned that there are two different types of game-related surveys, a gamified survey and a research game. What is the difference between them?
Differences are massive. I mean, not only about the differences between engagement that I mentioned before and the differences between taking part versus play, but even in the look and feel, even in the approach as a designer, how you would design a gamified survey compared to how you would design a research game is completely different. So with a lot of gamified surveys, you begin with a normal survey, and the gamification element is almost like an add-on, like an extra layer on top of the foundation of your traditional looking survey. And a lot of survey software companies do now provide gamification elements like point systems and levels and badges and things like that. But when you are when you're designing a fully fledged game for research, you come at it in the mindset of a game designer and a researcher. And there is harmony between the game and the research. They're inseparable. You know, I've had some clients, for example, NADIA, who say to me, well, doesn't the kind of game part distract from the research part? But you would have seen, Nadia, when you played Dubious, the game and the research are one of the same. The way that I design a storyline, the way that I even, you know, do the level design is born from the needs of the research. And I can't do my job designing a game for research unless I have my own initial research step. So the first thing I do, and if anybody is listening and interested in doing it, then please do follow these steps. So the first thing I do is completely holistically try to understand not just the research needs of my client, but how that translates into commercial value for them. So it's not enough for me to know that they want to understand which, you know, what kind of products people think are the most appealing, or what flavors they like the most, or how they want to design their clothing. I need to know what are they going to do with that research, because that makes me add more value to the design. And once I understand that, I then try to understand as much as I can about the audience, because I can't engage them if I don't know what's going to engage them. So I try to find out more about their lifestyles, their age, their genders, their culture, their interests. Really try to almost kind of create in my mind, who is this person that I'm trying to engage? And with these two pieces of information, so the research content and understanding the translation of that into commercial value and the audience, I can then go, right, now I can design a research game that captures the research objectives, that allows the participant to immerse themselves in that research content while simultaneously engaging that person because I know much more about them. And that's when you can start really having fun with the design, because that's when you'll do things like choose your color palette, choose the fonts, figure out what the right kind of layout is for every screen. So when you play Dubious, Nadia, as well as all the other games, there is nothing in any part of that game that is just kind of there by accident. Everything is there with function. And sound effects, even at the time that certain scores increase and maybe mute and become a slower tempo, all of that is done on purpose, just like how a video game developer would create a game. So that you don't really get that level of detail in design when you're doing a gamified survey. It's just like, well, here's my standard survey, I'm going to gamify it by adding points and badges and levels. I mean, I'm not saying that there isn't a huge level of thought in it, there is, but it's a completely different approach as a designer. And then of course the output, the look and feel is different, and the way people interact with that is different. And the reason that that's important is because the data will be different, because of course that's what this is all about.
Probably the last question. For what kind of business and research questions can gamified surveys and research games be used?
All of them is the short answer. I've conducted studies with so many different types of clients, for so many different types of audiences, for so many different types of projects, from, researching millennials to understand their preferences for new kinds of soup, to interviewing the UK public on how they perceive futuristic forms of identification, for speaking to women on creating their own clothing. It can be used for anything. Again, it comes down to the design. If you are willing and able enough to put the time and energy into designing something that's really tailor-made to your research subject, your audience, for your client, you can produce a very engaging research game or gamified survey for absolutely any project. I get a lot of people that say things like, surely this is just for kids, right? Because it's games and it's just for kids. But actually, it is just as engaging if you design it right for adults as well as children and teenagers and different age groups. It just boils down to design on how you're engaging those different audiences. And obviously, if you've got something that's visual, then it makes sense to use quite a visual platform, like a gamified survey research game. For example, if you're talking to people about designing their own clothes or designing their ideal product or whatever it might be, it lends itself to that kind of visual development. But you don't need a research game for that. You can still do visual stuff in a traditional survey. I just think it's really about saying, okay, what kind of project do I have where I see really low engagement, even if it's about insurance, which nobody finds exciting unless you're an insurance broker. I think if you're thinking about using game-based research methods, that's my umbrella term for gamification and research games. If you're thinking of using game-based research methods, I would start with a subject that is not very engaging for your audience, right? Because this is a tool to cure that issue. And then go from there. Because there are so many traditional surveys out there that do very well in terms of engagement because they're about subjects that people inherently find interesting. If I got a traditional survey, for example, about Lush products, which I love, I would do it, whether it was gamified or not. So if it's, you know, my philosophy, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But if you're thinking of using game-based research methods, start with a project that where you know the research subject is not very engaging and maybe a little bit boring, and see how you go from there. But yeah, you can use these methodologies for any subject, for any age group. You just have to spend your time designing it to the best of your abilities.
And how much time does it take to design a research survey?
Put it down to a process now. I can generate an idea for a completely new game and design the game architecture and the level design and things like that, and do all the graphics for the game, which could involve anywhere between 30 to 60, 70 screens in 10 working days.
Betty, thank you a lot for your time and a very interesting conversation which we had today.
Yeah, I really appreciate you reaching out to me and interviewing me for your blog. And I just want to say good luck with your blog. I had a look at it. It just looks fascinating. You've got lots of different kinds of articles in there. You're clearly someone who's very curious and interested in lots of different things. So would love to keep in touch.